Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for patch 10.21. The current meta is quite polarizing as most players gravitate towards one build while others try to figure out what counters it. Despite one build being better than the rest, it's worth keeping your options open as there's likely to be a hotfix or B patch sometime soon. With all that said, let's dive on in. But before we return to the video, don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. There's a lot of questions about whether any builds can do well against Divine, so our list will be focused on a few of those comps. To start it off, we have Ahri Vanguard Mystic as the composition coming in at number 5. Ahri does keep getting whacked by the nerf bat, but despite that, she's still a solid carry due to the amount of AoE damage that she can do. She is definitely weaker after the health changes as a frontliner, so the best way to play her is to try and protect her for as long as possible. That's where Vanguard and Mystic come in, as they're both great traits for slowing down fights. The core of the build is rather simple, as you want Ahri for the main carry, with Sejuani and Aatrox as must-haves for Vanguard. Yuumi is a perfect Mystic to play that will give you Spirit, and Thresh with Cassiopeia is a strong pair for Dusk. Anything after that is just filling in your build to hit 4 Vanguard and 4 Mystic. As for what Chosen to go for, there's 3 choices between Ahri, a Mystic, and a Vanguard. Vanguard is ideal as your frontline needs to stay alive for a long time. While Ahri as a Chosen can be good, it's worth noting you shouldn't have too much of an issue 2-starring her as she's not that contested anymore. The champions you want to prioritize items are Ahri, since she's the main carry, and Sejuani as her ultimate is the second best in the comp. Jeweled Gauntlet is still one of the best items to give Ahri as it increases her overall damage by a huge amount. Quicksilver or Guardian Angel should be your focus for defensive items, and a third item can be any AP item, though a second Jeweled Gauntlet is ideal. Sejuani wants any defensive item, but in particular, Sunfire Cape is good for additional damage, and Zizirot Portal will focus enemies onto her so she casts earlier on in the fight. Beyond that, any defensive items are good. Lastly, you can look for universally useful items like Locket, Zeke's, and Chalice. All in all, this comp is decent into Divine because of the AoE burst that Ahri does, but it can struggle against other meta builds like Talon or Sharpshooters if your Ahri gets bursted down. Next, we have Duelist as the number 4 composition. Duelist as a composition is basically about ending the fight as quickly as possible. Primarily, it relies on hitting an early Yasuo 3, but Jax, Lee Sin, and Kalista are all key components of the build as well. In terms of core champions, you're going to want to aim for a Duelist Chosen, preferably Yasuo, and just fill in the composition with Duelist from there. You can go for 6 Duelists, but you may want to consider just 4 to fill in the other slots with useful traits, such as Adept or Mystic. A typical level 8 team will look something like Yasuo, Jax, Kalista, Lee Sin, Fiora, Shen, Yone, and Janna. This gives you 6 Duelists, Adept, Divine, Enlightened, Exile, and Mystic. There's 2 issues with Duelists that you want to consider before playing them. First is that Yasuo 3 is generally a must-have for the build to succeed, meaning that you need to find him early on as a Chosen. Second is that you're contesting quite a few champions that Divine players want, so you may struggle in hitting those units and upgrading them. But if you're able to hit everything that you need for this build, it can be a great way to get a top 3. It will struggle against Divine, but let's be real, most builds do. Moving along, let's talk about the composition coming in at number 3, Talon Enlightened. Talon as a main carry is amazing against a lot of compositions as he can straight up snipe a carry. Once he gets going in a team fight, the chances of winning increase a lot. The issue with Talon is when he isn't able to get a kill fast enough and the fight drags on, which is why this build can struggle against Divine. As the name of the build suggests, you're going to want to focus on Talon as the main carry with Enlightened units supporting him. The secondary carry is generally going to be Morgana, since she provides a decent amount of AoE. The standard level 8 composition will be Talon, Morgana, Irelia, and Janna for Enlightened, with Shen and Yone providing Adept. Add in Lux for Dazzler and any assassin to go with Talon. Additionally, if you have a Chosen Enlightened, you can play for 6 Enlightened, or you can just stay for 4, but it varies game to game. Since Talon is the main carry, you want to prioritize giving him items. Infinity Edge, Rapid Fire Cannon, Guardian Angel, and Quicksilver are all solid item choices for him. The goal for Talon is to beef up his damage just enough so that he can kill targets in 1, maybe 2 hits, while giving enough defensive tools to survive. Morgana can get by with a Morellonomicon to increase her AoE damage. Beyond those items, you can lean on Zeke's Chalice or Locket as all-around useful items to make. We expect this build to do much better once the hotfix is in place, as there's quite a few backline compositions that Talon is good against that may rise up in popularity once Divine is nerfed. For now, you can use this build to get a top 4, and if you can high roll a Talon 3, you may be able to secure a top 2. Alright, let's move on to the number 2 composition on today's list, Sharpshooters. Sharpshooters is quite possibly the best contender for taking down a Divine composition. The amount of damage that Jhin can output plus the CC that Jinx provides can often overwhelm the defenses of the Divine trait. But there are some downsides of this composition that we'll get into later. For now, let's talk about the core champions and traits. As the name suggests, the primary trait to focus on is Sharpshooters. You will definitely need a chosen Sharpshooter for this, as you want the all-important 6-piece buff, as it adds a lot of extra damage with the additional ricochets. So for starters, 5 of your champions need to be Jhin, Jinx, Teemo, Vayne, and Nidalee. Any of them work fine as the chosen, although Jhin is obviously the best, followed by Jinx and then Teemo. After the Sharpshooters, it's all about adding in frontline and CC. That means units like Sejuani and Aatrox are perfect additions since they're both Vanguards and have good crowd control. It's also possible to run Keepers, as the shields can be useful, plus Jarvan, Kennen, and Azir have pretty decent crowd control. What you add in mainly comes down to what the game gives you. Just make sure whatever you're playing gives you a strong frontline. One of the reasons why Sharpshooters are a great choice in 1021 is due to the buffs that Zeke's Herald received. Now that it provides 40% attack speed, it's the perfect item to play in your backline, as it gives you extra damage to Jhin and attack speed to Jinx. While stacking it beyond 2 is unlikely, making at least 1 is ideal. Besides that, you can focus on items towards Jhin, such as Giant Slayer, Infinity Edge, and Deathblade. Guardian Angel is also a solid choice since it gives attack damage, but Quicksilver is always a useful item for a carry. Jinx is the other champion that you want to give items to, as she uses anything that helps her ultimate cast quicker. Rageblade with Shojin is an amazing pairing, so aim for those 2 items alongside a Quicksilver if possible. Lastly, you can always toss defensive items onto your front line, but an item that's particularly worth considering is ZZ Rot Portal. If you position it properly, it can even taunt assassins, which can help protect your squishy Sharpshooters. An important thing to consider when playing Sharpshooters, particularly against Divine, is maximizing the damage of your Jhin. You always want to try and position him in a way that will target the most important frontline champion on the enemy team so that they die really early on. Against Divine, for example, Warwick is often in the front, so maneuvering your Jhin to hit him right away is great to do. Overall, Sharpshooters are a strong composition against the current top meta build, Divine, but can struggle against high damage builds that kill their frontline too quickly, or assassin builds that get to their backline. In general, expect to get a top 4 with this build, with the potential of top 2 if you get perfect items. And now we're on to the number 1 composition of the current meta, you guessed it, Divine. We know it's not a surprise that Divine is number 1, but we have to talk about this comp right now because it's clearly the best, at least until it receives a hotfix. So let's talk about why Divine is so good. It really comes down to 2 important things, Warwick and Static Shiv. Divine as a trait got reworked as well, but overall, it's not the main reason as to why this composition is doing well. Sure, having 50% damage reduction and bonus true damage is fantastic, especially when it lasts upward of 10 seconds, but it's really the pair of Warwick and Shiv that takes the composition to the next level. The reason being that Warwick has a built-in attack speed buff, lifesteal, and can proc his own form of CC by fearing nearby enemies when a champion is killed. That means he can make use of the bonus true damage that Shiv provides on his own, which, by the way, does 175 bonus true damage. Alongside Warwick, you can also get quite a few useful traits that go well with Divine. Aurelia pairs with Shen and Yone for Adept, which slows the enemy's attack speed, which also counts as CC for Shiv. Throw a second Dazzler to go along with Lux, as that effect also counts as CC. Add all of these things together and you have the perfect storm of champions and traits to complement a Warwick using Static Shiv. Okay, we'll move on from talking about Divine. Simply put, it's good and currently doesn't have a main counter to it. Due to the amount of players contesting it, you may not always do well by playing Divine, but chances are if you find a Warwick with a Static Shiv, you have strong odds at placing top 4. We'll have to wait and see how this build does once a hotfix comes. That's going to be it for our top 5 builds for patch 1021. Before we go though, let's talk about a few honorable mentions. Up first, we have Ninja Assassin. This is a composition that can do well with an Akali chosen, as she can basically one-shot any champion once you have 4 Ninja and 4 Assassin. but it currently struggles against Divine, as most builds do, and Akali isn't the safest of carries, so builds like Sharpshooter can deal with her fairly well. Another issue is that Shen is highly contested, and if you're unable to find him, then, well, you can't run 4 Ninja. Overall, this build should do better once Divine is less of an issue, but it may need a few more buffs to truly shine. Next is Elder Hunter, which is basically just Ashe as the main carry. Elder Woods can provide a ton of extra defenses, but that doesn't really matter much when there's true damage on the board, so they tend to struggle against Divine and Static Shiv in general. But Hunter as a trait is a potential counter to Divine, as it's possible to one-shot a unit when the trait procs. This is the build to keep watch on, as it could easily rise to the top of the meta once players explore its potential more. And our last honorable mention for today is Dusk. Dusk, oh Dusk, how the mighty have fallen. Truth be told, this build struggles a lot right now and isn't even going to be enough to earn your team a top 4. But that's because of Static Shiv. Shiv does bonus damage against shield, and the main carry for Dusk is Riven, who shields herself to stay alive. Thus, you can see why Dusk is having a bit of a problem. It's made into our honorable mentions because we're likely to see a hotfix nerf to Shiv midway through the patch, which should let Dusk rise back up as a viable build once again. For now, we're recommending not playing this build too much unless you think you can hit a Riven 3. That is going to be it for today's video, folks. We all know Divine is the best composition, but we recommend trying out other builds on today's list just to get a feel for them. Especially since we think that Divine is going to receive a hotfix, which means that being practiced on other builds may put you ahead of the pack. Let us know in the comment section below what compositions you've been enjoying and if we missed any that you think should be on the list. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.